My weird classmate tried to brand me by pressing hot metal with a crest on it against my skin. So I got my revenge in full and made him beg. 6 months later, at graduation, he begged me not to mention him in my speech for best student. I was 13 when my parents disowned me, and it was the best day of my life, because that's when they sent me to an elite Swiss boarding school. You see, up until that point, my parents had been fucking cruel. So even being surrounded by successful white guys and constantly feeling like an imposter was better than living at home. I thought I'd be the only one feeling like an outcast, until I met saving grace 3 months later. She showed up in the form of a guy with a backpack and a homemade haircut named Randy. As soon as he walked into the dining hall, everyone went silent. I was about to ask him to sit next to me and my friends when my roommate Jake grabbed my arm. Don't. The last student to get a scholarship stole 3 Rolexes and someone's MacBook before he got expelled. I wanted to tell Jake that I knew what it was like not to belong, but I also remembered eating alone the first month before I got accepted. So instead, I just nodded and tried to tell myself that if I had to go through hell to earn my place here, then so did he. But what they did to him in the next few weeks still haunts me to this day. It all started small. They installed a metal detector in the library that only he had to go through. Rich kids would deliberately spill things on him because they knew he couldn't afford to replace them. And instead of fighting back, he did something even worse. He was kind. When his mom sent over homemade cookies, he shared them with everyone, including the kids who were tormenting him. I saw him pick up a $50 bill off the floor and ask everyone who it belonged to. It was one of those high school situations where you don't know who's telling the truth, so you decide to stay out of it. But then came Tradition Week. For those who don't know, that's the week where if your parents went to school, you get to assault kids whose parents didn't. All in the name of tradition. I figured if I stayed in the library, I'd be okay. I was walking back to my room at 11 o'clock when 3 alumni students cornered me in the basement. Preston stepped out of the shadows, holding the metal school crest in his hand like he'd done it 100 times before. 2 other alumni students blocked my exits while he flicked a lighter and held the flame under the metal. "Get ready," he said, watching the edges of the crest begin to glow orange. "You're about to taste our spirit," he told the others. They grabbed my arms and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything except how much this was going to hurt. But then I heard the fire alarm. The sprinklers went off immediately, soaking everything. Preston dropped the hot metal and it hissed on the wet floor. "Shh, we have to go," one of them said. They released my hands and rushed toward the exit. Through the stream of water, I saw Randy standing at the fire alarm, his hand still on it. He helped me up and we walked out as the guards hurried past us toward the basement. The next morning, we were called into the principal's office. I walked in with my head held high, thinking that Preston was finally going to get what he deserved. But the principal didn't even look at me. He just stared at Randy. "Do you have any idea how much damage you've done?" he asked, his tone cold and urgent. "The basement is flooded, thousands of dollars in water damage. They tried to... This is what happens when we let your kind in here." The principal cut him off. "You can take the kid out of the slum, but you can't take the slum out of the kid. One more incident and you're out." Ray's shoulders slumped and he nodded. They let us go, but it seemed Preston was the gift that kept on giving, because when we walked out, he was standing there waiting outside the room with his little Paw Patrol gang. He whispered something to Randy that made him freeze, and then he walked away laughing. Randy didn't tell me what he said. He just hurried off alone. I tried to go check on him, but he'd been in his room all day with the door locked. I was eating breakfast when everyone started running out into the hallway. I followed them, thinking there was some kind of school shooting or something, but the crowd led to Ray's room. Inside, campus security was turning the place upside down. Randy was standing in the corner, an extremely stoic expression on his face. "They found the devil's weed in his desk drawer," the campus security guard announced. By noon, Randy was expelled. No investigation, no questions, just total expulsion. I found Randy that evening behind the dorms, stuffing his few belongings into a trash bag. He was crying, literally sobbing. This kid who had remained kind despite everything they'd done to him had finally broken. I said nothing, just sat there while he cried. After a few minutes, he looked at me with reddish eyes. "You're the only one who's tried to be nice to me here," he said, wiping his face. "You deserve to know why this is so important." He pulled a crumpled photograph from his wallet. A man in scrubs standing outside a hospital. "My little sister has leukemia. My dad could have helped her in Syria, but here we can barely afford her chemo. I had to save her. He stood up, slinging the garbage bag over his shoulder. Preston knew all this. That's what he'd whispered. That my sister would die before I could help her. Rage boiled in my blood. I'd spent almost a year wishing someone would put Preston in his place. But I never knew it would be me. I watched Ray's taxi disappear into the Swiss mountain fog, then pulled out my phone with shaking hands. My thumbs moved across the screen, typing a message to Preston. "You destroyed an innocent man. It's not over yet." A few seconds later, a laughing emoji appeared in response, then another, then 5 in a row. The next morning in the cafeteria, Preston sat at his usual table, surrounded by his lacrosse teammates and various students from alumni families. I was positioned at the next table, pretending to read, but actually taking notes on my phone. Preston's voice carried around the room as he gestured dramatically, describing how some people just couldn't handle an elite education. He never called Randy by name, but his cruel jokes about charity cases and people who didn't belong made his intentions clear. Every veiled threat, every derisive laugh, I captured it all. Jake found me in our room later that day, pacing, looking over the tapes. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, his face serious. "You need to stop this," he warned, glancing nervously at my phone. "Preston's dad owns half of Switzerland. Banks, real estate, you name it. You can't beat that kind of money." I ignored his warning and spent that night in the computer lab compiling everything I had. The tapes, the timestamps, the witness statements I'd collected. I emailed it all to the school board and Ray's family, hitting send with a sense of satisfaction. The automated response immediately ruined that feeling. All complaints should be filed through the proper administrative channels. Please contact your advisor for assistance. The morning meeting brought another blow. I tried to log into my email to check my responses, but the screen flashed red. Account suspended for misuse of school resources. My stomach sank as I realized that the IT department had already taken action against me. Preston herded me into an empty classroom after the meeting. Marcus stood to the side like a bodyguard. He held up his phone, showing crystal clear CCTV footage of me entering the computer lab the night before. "It's a funny thing when you have buildings to your name," he said with a cold smile. "People are very helpful when you ask for a favor." Back in my room, I found the worst. All my saved notes were gone from my cloud storage. Every file was deleted. Marcus later admitted, almost proudly, that he convinced building security to let him into the computer lab after I left. "Just studying late at night," he told them, and they handed him the access card without question. Over the next few days, the library became my sanctuary, the one place where Preston's influence seemed weaker. Sarah found me there, sitting across from me at the table. She was 21, the daughter of some ambassador, and known for asking awkward questions at student government meetings. She leaned forward and whispered that she'd noticed my email was paused in the public system logs. "I know what Preston's doing," she said quietly, "and I want to help." Preston's response quickly escalated. During lunch, his girlfriend, Astrid, passed my desk carrying a full cup of coffee. She tripped at just the right moment, spilling the contents over my laptop bag. The coffee immediately leaked out, and I heard the hissing sound of dying electronics. Astrid's apology was as false as her concern, delivered with a smirk that matched Preston's. That evening, I found a note under my door. The handwriting was neat, understated. "Stop this, or you'll end up like Randy. We know about your pre-admission psych records." My blood ran cold. These were supposed to be confidential recordings, documenting the therapy I'd needed after my parents' abuse. Somehow, Preston had gotten access to them. Sarah proved her worth the next day. She slipped me a USB drive during recess, her expression carefully neutral. Later, alone in my room, I discovered what she'd been collecting. Her own recordings of Preston's abuse, screenshots of suspicious messages between Preston and Marcus, even a few photos of Preston outside Ray's room the night before he was discovered. She'd been building her own case for weeks. The pressure mounted when I received an official letter stating that my student worker position was under review due to the recent unrest on campus. Without the job, I couldn't afford the extra fees the school loved to charge. It was another calculated move to push me out. Jake's sudden request for a room change shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. He sat on his bed, not looking me in the eye, and explained. Preston's father had called his parents directly, mentioning how frustrating it would be if their Swiss residency permits ran into any complications when they were renewed. Jake's family owned a small restaurant in Zurich. They couldn't risk their entire income. Alone in what was now my single room, I began to research. The student newspaper archives were digital, buried in previous year's issues. I found what I was looking for. Another scholarship student had dropped out after a run-in with Preston. The pattern was right there, in black and white, hidden in plain sight. Preston's next move was particularly cruel. He'd started dating Emma, my calculus study partner. She was the only one who understood the complex material well enough to help me study for finals. Suddenly, she was too busy with Preston to meet for study sessions, always apologizing with clearly rehearsed excuses. Even the cafeteria staff seemed to be turning on me. My special diet meals, ordered because of severe allergies, began to mysteriously disappear. The staff threw up their hands apologetically, claiming they must have forgotten to put one aside. The nearest restaurant that could accommodate my allergies was a 20-minute walk into town, expensive and time-consuming. I tried another official channel, making an appointment with Dr. Hoffman, the school counselor. She listened to my concerns with a patronizing smile, occasionally making notes that looked more like scribbles. When I finished, she sat back and suggested that I might be experiencing adjustment difficulties and paranoid ideation. Only later did I learn that she had been dating Preston's uncle. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. During a required European history study group, I found myself paired with Preston's roommate, Daniel. He was nervous around me at first, but gradually relaxed as we went through the material. When he invited me into their room to borrow a textbook, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Preston's side of the room was meticulously organized, everything in its place. While Daniel was looking for a textbook, I noticed a leather journal on Preston's desk. My heart pounded as I quickly flipped through it. The pages were filled with names, dates, and notes. Randy, a Syrian, a sick sister dependent on scholarship money. A previous target, Alex Chen, had dropped out in March of 2023. He had been tracking problem students, documenting their vulnerabilities like a predator studying prey. Astrid must have noticed I was spending time with Daniel because she started showing up everywhere I went, asking probing questions about our friendship. Her suspicions were obvious, and I knew she would report any unusual behavior to Preston. The journal made Preston's pattern clear. Isolate a target, apply pressure through multiple channels, then eliminate them from the school. It was systematic, calculated, and had worked at least twice before. Understanding his methodology didn't make it any easier to counter. One afternoon, Marcus approached me privately near the athletic fields. He glanced around nervously before speaking, his usual confidence replaced by visible guilt. He admitted that he felt bad for Randy, but he was afraid of losing his scholarship. His family had sacrificed everything to send him here. I saw an opportunity and carefully showed him some of the evidence from Preston's journal, explaining how the persecution system worked. Marcus's face went white when he recognized his name on one of the lists, flagged as a potential vulnerability for monitoring. Preston must have noticed Marcus's shift in loyalties, because he soon gave him a test. Marcus admitted that Preston had asked him to monitor my messages, to report who I was talking to and what I was planning. The fact that Marcus was telling me this meant that something had changed. The turning point came publicly when Sarah stood up during a student council meeting and asked point-blank why Randy had been expelled without a proper investigation. The room fell silent. The faculty advisor tried to shut down the discussion, but Sarah insisted, calmly listing the holes in the official story. She didn't directly accuse anyone, but her message was clear. Preston watched from the back of the room, his jaw set. As I walked back to the dorm that night, I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. We were building something, Sarah, Marcus, and I. We had evidence, allies, and the beginnings of a strategy. But Preston had money, connections, and years of experience destroying anyone who challenged him. The real fight was just beginning. Preston's next attempt to discredit me was through social media. Fake posts with my name on Instagram and Twitter spreading vicious rumors about the staff. The posts claimed I'd witnessed inappropriate behavior from teachers, with made-up details that rang true enough to raise concerns. Within hours, concerned parents were calling the school, demanding answers. I recognized the escalating pattern from the notes in Preston's journal. This was no longer just an attempt to silence me. He was trying to make me radioactive, someone the school would have to remove to protect its reputation. I spent the evening documenting the fake accounts, taking screenshots of the metadata that proved they were newly created, all from the same IP range. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Mr. Petrov, the janitor who had been cleaning these hallways for 20 years, pulled me aside after breakfast. His chapped hands shook slightly as he glanced around to make sure we were alone. He explained in broken English mixed with German that he had seen Preston outside Rye's room the night before the drugs were discovered. He had been fixing a light fixture in the hallway and had seen Preston slip in with something in his hand. The timing was perfect for when Randy was in a mandatory study session. Emma had found me in the library that day, her face flushed with anger. She had discovered Preston's journal during one of their study dates, specifically the pages about her. He had written detailed notes about her academic performance, her family's financial situation, and how dating her would isolate me from helping with calculus. She confronted him, and his casual admission that she was nothing more than a tool shattered any feelings she might have had. Now she wanted to help us. I worked with Mr. Petrov to create a written account of what he had seen. We made multiple copies, storing them in different places around campus. Sarah suggested keeping one with her parents at the embassy, another with a sympathetic teacher, and a third in a safe deposit box in town. We were learning to better protect our evidence. Campus security was useless when I tried to file a formal report. They explained that without physical evidence, they couldn't conduct a retrospective investigation. The planted substances had long since been lost, destroyed, per school policy. The head of security, a man who had worked at the school for 15 years, seemed genuinely sympathetic, but explained that his hands were tied by protocol. Our alliance was cemented during a late-night meeting in Sarah's single room. Marcus had committed himself fully to the cause when he realized he was on Preston's list of potential problems. Emma had brought in her own recordings of conversations with Preston, in which he had casually discussed his cleaning house philosophy. We were no longer just individuals. We were a coordinated resistance. Research into the incident last year had revealed disturbing parallels. The student on the scholarship, a boy from Vietnam, had experienced the same pattern: isolation, false accusations, sudden departure. His social media had gone dark after that. But Emma managed to find an old Instagram post where he cryptically mentioned, quote, "The post went viral in our small community when Sarah shared it. Other students began sharing their own stories with Preston. Nothing dramatic like false allegations of substance use, but a pattern of casual cruelty, destroyed assignments, spread rumors, orchestrated social exclusions. The scope was wider than we had imagined. I fought the urge to immediately publish everything we'd gathered. Sarah advised patience, explaining that we needed a flawless case. One premature move could give Preston's father time to mobilize his resources and bury us. We needed to be strategic, methodical, and absolutely certain. Preston's father's sudden visit to campus caused alarm. Officially, it was for a meeting about routine donations, but the timing was all too convenient. He was touring the campus with the dean. His presence was a clear reminder of the family's financial clout. Several board members joined them for lunch, and Preston made sure to be in his father's sight, the perfect son. Marcus took a significant risk by signing Preston up during a lacrosse team meeting. Preston, feeling safe among his teammates, bragged about maintaining the school's standards and eliminating those who didn't belong. His casual racism and class inequality were on full display as he explained how certain people were simply not cut out for an elite education. Several of his teammates looked uncomfortable, but no one challenged him. Astrid's departure had come as a shock to everyone, including Preston. She'd found her name in his journal, with notes on her family's connections and how to exploit them. The realization that she'd been manipulated from the start of their relationship hit hard. She'd brought us Preston's backup files, which he'd foolishly given her access to when he needed help organizing his undergraduate applications. Preston's attempt to buy my silence was almost insulting in its transparency. He'd approached me after dinner, offering to ensure my graduation with honors if I'd drop everything. He could make my undergraduate applications shine, he promised, with letters of recommendation from board members and alumni. All I had to do was stop investigating and convince others to do the same. My refusal clearly surprised him. He truly believed that everyone had a price. The files provided by Astrid revealed the true scale of Preston's operation. He had kept detailed files on dozens of students, categorizing them by threat level and vulnerability. Screenshots of embarrassing social media posts, academic difficulties, family financial information, health issues. He had been accumulating leverage for years. It was blackmail material, pure and simple. We discovered that Preston's network of control was smaller than it appeared. Beyond his core group of wealthy friends and a few key administrators, his influence was based largely on fear and assumption. People assumed he had more power than he actually did, and that assumption became self-fulfilling. As we began mapping his actual reach, the holes became apparent. Marcus's inside information proved invaluable when he revealed that Preston kept his most sensitive files on an encrypted cloud service. He'd memorized the password by watching Preston type it in repeatedly. We obtained a treasure trove of messages, including emails between Preston and his father, discussing problem students and how to deal with them. Sarah's parents' concerns reached the school board through diplomatic channels. As ambassadors, they couldn't intervene directly, but they could express concerns about patterns of bullying affecting their daughter's education. Other parents began asking similar questions, especially after the revelations of Parents' Weekend spread through family networks. Our alliance grew stronger through adversity. Late-night strategy sessions in Sarah's room became a safe haven where we could talk freely and plan our next steps. We shared our own stories of feeling like outsiders, and I realized that none of us really fit Preston's definition of who belonged at the school. This shared experience united us. I held to my principles even when tactical advantages arose. The embarrassing information Preston had gleaned about innocent students might have been useful leverage, but using it would not have distinguished us from him. We agreed to focus only on the evidence of his wrongdoing, not the collateral damage to others. Preston's condition began to crack under the pressure. During gym class, when someone mentioned Rye's name, Preston snapped that Randy got what he deserved. Several students overheard the comment, and word spread quickly. His mask of plausible deniability began to slip. 5 independent witnesses came forward, confirming that they had seen Preston outside Rye's room that night. 2 of them were students from older families who had kept quiet out of fear, but could not bear to see what had happened. Their testimony carried weight because they had nothing to gain and potentially much to lose by coming forward. The lacrosse team's gradual distancing from Preston became noticeable. After Marcus shared a recording of Preston's standard speech, several players began to question whether they wanted to be associated with those views. Team cohesion disintegrated as moral lines were drawn. Teachers began to notice patterns they had previously overlooked. Scholars Preston had chosen were constantly leaving the school, always under suspicious circumstances. General faculty meetings grew tense as faculty wondered whether they were unknowingly complicit in systemic discrimination. Sarah's connection to an education advocate who tracked private school issues opened new avenues. This defender had documented similar patterns at elite institutions across Europe. Our situation was not unique, but it was one of the most egregious they had encountered. Preston's desperate attempt to regain control led to the disclosure of conversations. Cornered in the cafeteria by questions about Randy, he had declared that his father had expected him to protect their traditions. The admission that this was not just a matter of personal power, but of systemic and intergenerational continuity sent chills through all who heard it. Sympathetic teachers began keeping their own records of Preston's behavior patterns. They could not officially act without the support of the administration, but they could create records that might prove useful later. The French teacher who taught both Randy and the previous expelled student seemed especially determined to help. Preston's options narrowed as more students refused to participate in his schemes. His usual tactics of intimidation and bribery failed when people realized they weren't alone in opposing him. Collective resistance made it difficult to pursue him individually. Mr. Petrov's revelation about the employee holiday fund exposed another layer of corruption. Preston's family had given generously each year with implicit expectations of loyalty and silence. The employees who benefited felt compromised, caught between gratitude and growing anxiety about what they had missed out on. I chose to be kind where Preston was cruel. When his younger brother was struggling with advanced math, I offered to tutor him despite our conflict. The boy was nothing like Preston, shy, studious, and clearly uncomfortable with his family's ways. Through him, I saw the pressure Preston felt to uphold family traditions. Staff members from across campus shared stories during informal get-togethers. The maintenance crew, the cafeteria workers, and the groundskeepers all experienced Preston's aloofness and, occasionally, cruelty. These stories, though small individually, painted a picture of a man who viewed the maintenance staff as beneath his respect. Preston's attempt to turn Emma against me had disastrous consequences. She revealed that she had been recording their conversations for weeks, ever since she discovered his diary. His manipulative tactics, casual confessions, and derogatory comments about other students were preserved. Her technical skills in editing and organizing the notes proved invaluable. The principal's secretary witnessed a crucial interaction between Preston's father and her boss. The father's threats to reconsider the family's endowment unless the situation was handled properly were thinly veiled. She could not record the conversation, but she documented it in detailed notes immediately afterward. Parents' Weekend became a turning point when several families learned of Preston's systematic harassment. Students who had remained silent finally told their parents what was happening. The realization that their children had been living in fear of the power of one student shocked many families who had assumed the school provided a safe environment. Our alliance compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier. Testimonies, notes, documentation, and evidence filled hundreds of pages. Sarah's organizational skills created a clear narrative that showed not isolated incidents, but a systematic abuse of power. We made multiple copies, storing them safely. At a board meeting scheduled for next week, there will be a vote on new scholarship policies. Preston's father chaired a committee proposing stricter requirements and easier expulsion procedures. The timing was no accident. It was their attempt to legitimize what they were doing unofficially. During morning assembly, Preston's usual confidence wavered as he noticed the allied students sitting together. The visuals of a unified standoff clearly unsettled him. His usual smirk disappeared as he realized that his isolation tactics had failed. I struggled with the moral implications of our actions. Winning would mean destroying Preston's future just as he had destroyed Rye's. Despite everything, I could find no satisfaction in that prospect. We sought justice, not revenge, though the line was sometimes blurred. My last attempt at mercy was to issue a personal warning to Preston. I explained that the evidence was overwhelming and gave him a chance to make amends. He could admit his guilt, support the restoration of Rye, and work to change the system he had perpetuated. His laughter in response sealed his fate. A faculty revolt erupted at a staff meeting over proposed scholarship restrictions. Teachers who had remained silent for years finally spoke up, refusing to support a policy that would institutionalize discrimination. The usually reserved atmosphere erupted into heated debates about the school's values and future. The truth was spread through careful individual conversations, not public accusations. This folksy approach prevented Preston's father from deploying an effective counter-narrative. By the time he arrived for emergency damage control, the story had already permeated the entire campus community. Preston's desperation led to his biggest mistake. While his father was meeting with administrators, Preston attempted to plant contraband in my room, but Marcus tipped me off and I set up a camera to record the attempt. Security footage also captured him entering my room with a suspicious package. The evidence was undeniable. When campus security reviewed the footage, even they couldn't ignore such blatantly criminal behavior. Preston's attempt to frame me instead created undeniable evidence of his methods. The system he had manipulated for years had finally turned against him. A former scholarship student from Vietnam agreed to testify about his experiences via video call. His hands shook as he described the systematic harassment, the planted evidence, and the pressure to leave. Sarah's parents arranged a secure connection through embassy channels, ensuring that Preston's family could not track him down or intimidate him. During an emergency board meeting, Preston's father withdrew his threat to donate money after seeing the evidence he had collected. Board members who had previously bowed to his influence suddenly found resolve when confronted with documentation of criminal behavior. The atmosphere in the conference room changed tangibly as they realized their responsibility for facilitating systemic discrimination. My original group of friends slowly regrouped around me as the truth spread across campus. Students who had distanced themselves out of fear began approaching with apologies and offers of support. The dynamics in the cafeteria changed overnight. Preston's usual table emptied, leaving him isolated with only his most loyal supporters. Rye's foster family in town offered to testify about his exemplary behavior while living with them. They were horrified to learn of the false drug charges and wanted to help clear his name. Their willingness to speak out against the school's most powerful family inspired others in the community to speak out. The Alliance presented our evidence to the PTA during their emergency meeting. Sarah's organizational skills shone through as she led them through the systematic harassment, the planted evidence, and the institutional corruption that enabled it. Parents who believed their children were safe at this elite school left the meeting demanding immediate action. Preston's mother arrived on campus after reviewing the evidence at a PTA meeting. Her confrontation with her husband in the principal's office could be heard through the closed door. She demanded that he stop protecting their son from the consequences, threatening to go public if the family continued to obstruct justice. The documentation showed a clear pattern of harassment of scholarship students over 3 years. Each case followed the same methodology: isolation, pressure through multiple channels, false accusations, and forced withdrawal. The board could not ignore such systematic discrimination when presented with overwhelming evidence. An emergency vote during a board meeting resulted in a unanimous decision to review all scholarship student expulsions over the past 3 years. Only fears of liability forced action, as parents threatened to withdraw their children and seek legal redress unless the school took action to combat the systematic abuse. Preston's father made a last-ditch attempt to make amends. He threatened to use his connections to ruin my future, claiming he could guarantee that no university would accept me. His voice echoed down the corridor as he raged about ungrateful students on scholarships who didn't understand their place. Several elite universities mysteriously rejected my applications in the days that followed. Admissions committees cited technical difficulties or missing paperwork, but the pattern was too consistent to be a fluke. Preston's father's influence was wider than we expected, though not as far as he had hoped. Alliance members received anonymous threats to expose their own secrets. Marcus found notes warning about his family's immigration status, while Sarah received messages about her parents' diplomatic assignments. The desperation behind these threats demonstrated how cornered Preston's family felt. Marcus briefly wavered under the pressure when his parents called, terrified of possible deportation, but after a long night of deliberation, he stood firm, recognizing that giving in would only perpetuate the cycle of violence. His courage inspired others who had been similarly threatened. The education advocate Sarah's parents had put us in touch with was prepared to go public unless the board took decisive action. This threat of external disclosure finally spurred the administration to move beyond damage control to real reform. Before we could execute that plan, Preston made his critical mistake. He tried to directly intimidate Sarah's diplomatic parents, unaware of diplomatic immunity and the international implications of threatening embassy personnel. This overreach triggered mandatory reporting protocols that swept the situation out of the school's control. A formal complaint by Sarah's parents through diplomatic channels triggered an automatic review of all recent expulsions. The Swiss Ministry of Education could not ignore potential discrimination at an institution that welcomed foreign students. The investigation went beyond what Preston's father could influence or control. Preston denied everything during his board hearing, claiming that we had orchestrated a carefully planned conspiracy against him. But when confronted with CCTV footage, witness testimony, and his own diary documenting systematic harassment, his denials were unconvincing. Even his father's lawyer advised a negotiated settlement. An email audit sanctioned by the diplomatic complaint revealed Father Preston's own communications about maintaining standards and protecting traditions. His messages to board members explicitly discussed excluding students who did not fit their vision of the school's culture. These messages proved institutional corruption that went beyond the actions of Preston alone. Astrid provided the final, clinching proof by handing Preston's diary to the board. His handwritten notes on the harassment of vulnerable students, with detailed plans for each victim, eliminated any claim of ignorance or misunderstanding. The board members' faces paled as they read his methodical documentation. A moment of choice arrived, with the board offering options: pursue a criminal case with uncertain outcomes, or accept a comprehensive settlement that would include reinstating Rye, clearing all records of affected students, and implementing systemic reforms. The decision had a profound impact on all of us. I demanded specific terms for any settlement: full reinstatement of Rye with the restoration of his scholarship, a formal apology to all affected students, clearing all disciplinary records, and structural changes to prevent future harassment. The board, eager to avoid criminal prosecution and publicity, agreed to all of the demands. Preston's family accepted the terms to avoid media exposure and a broader investigation. Their lawyer negotiated quietly, knowing that criminal charges of drug planting and systematic harassment would completely ruin Preston's future. The agreement included Preston's immediate departure and a commitment by his family to fund expanded scholarship programs. Preston's final attempt at manipulation came during the final meeting. He claimed that I had orchestrated the whole thing out of jealousy, that I had fabricated evidence and turned people against him. But surrounded by witnesses to his behavior and confronted with his own documented atrocities, his accusations had no effect. Even his core supporters abandoned him as the evidence became overwhelming. Students from alumni families who had participated in his schemes distanced themselves, suddenly declaring that they had always been uncomfortable with his methods. The speed of their betrayal revealed how shallow their loyalties had been. Randy returned to campus 3 weeks later, his scholarship fully restored and his record cleared. The school confirmed his original acceptance into Yale's pre-med program, and the admissions office confirmed that his spot remained available. His quiet dignity during his return impressed all who had witnessed his unfair expulsion. Preston left the school quietly, his family lawyers handling all the arrangements. As part of the settlement, his family established a new scholarship fund specifically for Syrian refugees, though they insisted on anonymity. The irony was not lost on those who knew the full story. The director announced his early retirement at the end of his term, citing personal reasons. Several key administrators who had facilitated systemic discrimination were transferred or asked to seek opportunities elsewhere. The departure of the old guard opened the way for genuine reform. New policies included comprehensive protections for students receiving scholarships, anonymous reporting systems, mandatory investigation protocols, and oversight committees with student representation replaced the old system of giving in to influential donors. The changes came too late for Rye to suffer, but they would protect future students. Alliance members filled various student leadership positions as our classmates recognized our role in exposing corruption. I won the student government election on a reform platform supported by a coalition of scholarship students, international students, and even some students from alumni families who wanted real change. 6 months later, at the graduation ceremony, Randy gave the commencement address. He spoke eloquently about resilience, justice, and the power of standing together against systemic oppression. His acceptance to Yale Medical School was confirmed, and his sister's treatment was moving forward, thanks to an anonymous donation that we all knew came from Preston's mother, horrified by her son's cruelty. The Alliance members remained close throughout the rest of their time in school and beyond. Sarah went on to study international law, inspired by her role in seeking justice. Marcus received a full scholarship to MIT, his confidence restored by his confrontation with authority. Emma took up journalism, determined to expose systemic injustices. Mr. Petrov was recognized for his courage in speaking out to power, and staff felt more confident in reporting abuse without fear of retribution. The school transformed itself gradually, but truly. Merit was valued more than money, and diversity became a strength, not a target. The metal detector in the library was removed, and toxic traditions like Heritage Week were abolished. We proved that sometimes the best revenge is not to destroy your enemies, but to build a better future for those who come after. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought of the scared 13-year-old who had come here to escape abuse, and the scared boy who had pulled the fire alarm to save me from Preston's cruelty. Randy and I had found our place not by submitting to their rules, but by refusing to accept injustice. The school that had tried to break us had instead forged us into people who could change it. Preston's family continued to donate to the school, but their influence had clear limits. The board now realized that protecting abusers was too costly, and that true excellence meant creating opportunities for all talented students, no matter their background. It wasn't a perfect ending. Preston faced no criminal charges, and the trauma he caused couldn't be erased. But we had broken the cycle, exposed the system, and ensured that no future Preston would be able to act with such impunity. The most satisfying moment was a quiet conversation with Randy after the graduation ceremony. He thanked me for fighting for him when he couldn't fight for himself. I reminded him that he had saved me, above all. That night in the basement, we both understood that standing up to power was possible when people refused to stand alone. That lesson, more than any diploma, was the education that mattered.